You're watching Into Wine TV, and today we're talking about wine critics. And Michael, what is the influence of wine critics today?
A very good question, Lisa. That's something that's going to be debated not only here, but anywhere you go. All three of us write about wine. There are influential critics, Robert Parker, of course, being the most well-known. And I think there certainly is an industry for people to write about something. You have that in every industry. You have that in consumer reports, you have that with restaurants, so every industry has the idea of critics. What's interesting to me is that 10, 15 years ago you had influential individuals, and now that power has been sort of diluted down where you have a lot of wine writers, some of whom actually write formal criticism and some who don't, who are really getting into the fray. So you've got a lot of information that's out there. You add into that Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and any other kind of social media that's out there, and everyone's putting in their 2 cents. And I think the drawback is you have to really weed through it. Mm-hmm. If you look at Yelp as an example for staying at a hotel, a lot of people have an opinion. It doesn't mean the opinion's correct, but as you had mentioned earlier, Richard, there's something about a universality of opinion that is helpful.
Right, if you get enough opinions together, it starts to show an
if 10 people like something and one doesn't, you're going to kind of say. My frustration is when wine critics or wine magazines or publications for that matter take a stance as if they are the sole authority, and a lot do. And I've written for some of the top wine magazines, and they're guilty of doing that, of presenting themselves as the only place to get viable information. I'm much more generous and want a broad spectrum of information, but it has to be from people who actually know and understand wine. A lot of people write about wine, they don't know much about it, they're using verbiage or flowery speech or nearly poetry in some way to talk about wine, which clearly they don't understand the basics of wine. They probably have never made wine, which I think is important for any wine writer. I've made wine. I think it's so important to understand what a winemaker goes through.
So as a consumer, how do we determine who the critics are that know what they're talking about?
You have to try out some critics.
Yeah.
There are some big ones. Robert Parker, Stephen Tanzer is widely used. A lot of people in the business say to buy on Tanzer, since his ratings tend to be lower, I think more realistic, and to sell on Parker, because his can be rather inflated and you can get big bucks for a 98, 99 point wine. You know, those are two big names. You can start calibrating yourself and try some wines that they like and see if you agree or not. There are a lot of names, fortunately, just as Michael's saying, and you know, it's a real gift, the internet, the fact that so many opinions are available. There are wine blogs all over. You can start to follow wine blogs that deal with your particular region or deal with particular styles of wines that you like. There are critics who really bring something to the area. Again, as Michael was saying, who really studied that area, spent a lot of time in, for example, Burgundy, like Alan Meadows, who does the Burghound. I mean, he has become, you know, the most influential critic for that region because he spends so much time there, really knows it. He doesn't write about other areas. Well, he started writing about Pinot in California and a little bit about Champagne, but he really is focused. I get a lot from critics who do that, who really focus in and really have something additional to bring.
An area of expertise as opposed to, I know California better than I know things in Europe, so I don't tend to write about European wines as much because I don't have that experience. You do, I agree. You try them out. Maybe you buy some of the wines that they recommend and you see if those wines fit your palate. If they don't, then maybe you say, this isn't the right person for me. Or you find someone who has that specific area of expertise.
I think also cream rises to the top. You know, the world of bloggers today is massive and growing, and it's going to settle out at some point. And those who are the better ones, who are not, you know, a lot of road bloggers and people who are talking on the internet, especially the people who read them and then place comments, to me it's a little bit like road rage. It's ridiculous. You know, it's really, I get tired of it. But I think today the influence of the wine writer and bloggers are going to get more diluted and less impactful because of the sommelier rise. That the sommeliers certainly in America, I don't know about other countries, but in America the sommeliers are so organized now, and every year they're making more and more master sommeliers and, you know, certified sommeliers, and these people have direct influence on every day. I don't know how many people eat out in a good restaurant in America, maybe 1 million people a day, and these people are directly influenced by sommeliers, and
that's a very good point. And wine bars too that hire people with those master of wine or Court of Sommelier degrees, you're getting somebody who has studied a wide range of regions, who's really able to compare, who's able to educate the consumer at the wine bar or at the restaurant. And I think it's a wonderful thing that the influence of the critics, even though I am starting to be considered a critic myself, has been diluted. We had some critics that were over-influential, that really had a massive impact on the style of wines of a particular area. Some of us think for not altogether good effect, and that influence is definitely waning.
I wrote a bit on the sommelier and wine critic influence on Jancis Robinson's forum in her pages, and someone, when I said that sommeliers were going to become more and more powerful and more influential, brought up your forum, the cellar tracker, as being something that would be more important than the sommelier, because people can just look into cellar tracker to get there. But my view about that is that if you're in a restaurant, it's extremely rude to other diners to bring out it's also rude to the sommeliers who are trained, and you'd much rather probably have a nice conversation with a human being than to look up a score on the cellar track, and also it's just it's boring.
But some of us go and study the wine list in advance, and then, comparing it on Cellar Tracker, the value of something like Cellar Tracker is because there's so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of wines out there now, thousands of producers, 6,000 some in the US alone. It is impossible for any one critic or even stable of critics for something like Wine Spectator to taste it all. Cellar Tracker has become, Cellar Tracker was created by Eric Levine in Seattle, a former Microsoft project manager, and he developed Cellar Tracker to keep track of his own cellar, basically, as a tool for himself. And it's got wonderful search, comparison, statistical abilities to it. It's very flexible. It has become the largest compendium by far of tasting notes, professional critic tasting notes, because a lot of them are on there now, including Jancis and Tanzer and Berghound. But also individual consumers are encouraged to put their criticism, and they're encouraged to use the 100-point scale, so you can really get an average of what 25 people think of this wine who've had it in the last year or two. I was dubious to begin with. I agree, there is noise out there, no question. There are people blogging who really have no business doing it, although hopefully they're educating themselves over time. But when you get a large number of people, and that helps screen out some of the noise, and you can start to get some valuable comparisons.
And you have to trust your palate. A consumer has to trust their palate at some point. Every critic has their own palate. Doug Frost, as an example, is a friend of mine. He's a terrific. He can deconstruct a wine like nobody I know. But his palate's different than mine. And it doesn't mean that because Doug Frost says, I think this is a wine you should buy, that you should. So you have to begin to educate yourself, of course, trust your palate. I'm a big fan of talking to sommeliers or talking to anybody in a wine store. Find out someone who knows more information from you and learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the wine, a little bit like music, wines, anyone who can express themselves is basically an expert. But I think one of the problems with, even in the media, if you watch the news channels in America, the people who they bring on to be professional witnesses or experts are basically not, because the real intellectuals are stuck in the universities, and the professor of music of the Royal Academy of Music, he wouldn't ever be sitting on some popular thing talking about. So the real classic professional critics are, I think, a different level to the bloggers and all that. You just have to find them. And
yeah, so anybody who writes the word yummy, I don't read them, so that's just me.
Well, then you'd be knocking out Robert Parker as well.
But yummy is a great way to sell wine.
There's a lot of places out there to get information now about wine, and whether or not is that better, is that worse? Share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. Please visit us again at IntoWineTV.com and let us know what you think about this and our other episodes.
Yeah, be a critic.
That's right.
Be a yummy critic.
Have a great day. Thanks.